meeting for Thursday, September 23rd, 2021, and ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each Commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, September 16th, 2021, and each has informed me there's no need to discuss the minutes.
Move we approve the minutes of Thursday, September 16th, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Each Commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there's no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 through 5. The draft order to reopen and request comments in docket 4220 CE 182 associated with agenda items 5. Sorry, the notice is associated with agenda items 2 through 4, and the draft order associated with agenda item 5. The suggested minutes associated with agenda item 6, denying the request in its entirety because the applicant's request doesn't satisfy one or more of the eligibility criteria. Commissioner Heathner has abstained from voting on agenda item 6. Order suggested minute associated with agenda item 8. Denying Mr. Evers' request for formal review of his complaint.
I'm getting there. I move we approve the notices of proceeding associated with agenda items 2 through 4.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. For agenda item 5, docket 4220 CE 182, I move that we approve the draft order to reopen and request for comment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Agenda item 6, docket 1 IC 532, I move that we deny the request.
Second? Oh, sorry.
That's all right. We got it, the deal.
Put a period there.
I'm good with that one.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those abstaining?
Aye.
Okay.
Well, that's right. You were, okay. Now okay, agenda. We've had coffee today. No, sir. Agenda item 8, docket 6630 CC 225-607. Move that we deny the request of Mr. Evers for formal review of his complaint against We Energies.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that takes us to agenda item 7. This is docket 1-IC-533, and again, consistent with his recusal policy, Commissioner Heathner will not be participating in this discussion or in this vote. So this is the application for intervenor compensation filed by the Village of Cambridge to participate in docket 1911-100. That's the application of Koshkonong Solar Energy Center to construct a generation facility in the towns of Christiana and Deerfield. So the town earlier this summer filed an IC request totaling $75,000. That was later revised, and the revised intervenor comp request in front of us is $60,615. The applicant believes that they are the appropriate party to be able to present evidence on the potential impacts of the proposed project on that municipality's finances, services, quality of life, and future growth potential. There are legal criteria when we talk about whether or not an applicant qualifies for intervenor compensation. That criteria is listed in Wisconsin Administrative Code in PSC Chapter 3. They submitted a work plan where they plan to have attorneys working and to act as legal counsel for their work in the docket, and then they would also hire a consultant to appear as a witness at the hearing. I looked at their proposal and heard back from staff in terms of what do we normally see in terms of these types of requests. And in my review, I think it's consistent with prior requests. I do think that given that we're hearing a lot from communities that are potentially hosts to facilities, I do think that they bring to bear a unique perspective, and it's a perspective that I think can only help the record. So I was prepared to fully fund their request in the amount of $60,615, which is all one. Mr. Nowak.
Thanks. This one, too, I have reviewed both the filing for them and the response from the applicant for the project as well. I was not prepared to fund any of it, and there's a few reasons why. one of the criteria, and there's several criteria you noted listed in the administrative code that they have to meet. And the first one is financial need. And while I am extraordinarily sympathetic to their land use needs and their financial situation, they did not, to me, demonstrate that there would be financial hardship without this funding. And their assertion that this came really without any notice, that they couldn't prepare to do it, fell very short with me. To me, it was more of a lack of proper planning on their part. And as I have said at the other meetings, I think villages need to start to get to, if they are going to be, this is not even, they don't even have property that is directly impacted by the project. That's a little unique here as well. They need to start planning, and I don't want to send a signal too, if we reward that we do this, that, municipalities, villages, whatever, can wait, and then we'll just fund. We have to have a little more responsibility on that part and their planning. I was a little concerned too. I do think the interests, they can still be represented. I certainly would like their information in the record. I was a little uncertain exactly how much and what Cambridge would use the money for. I'm concerned that, I think they're going to rewrite a new comprehensive plan, and that's not what we want here. While part of it be useful for this docket, we shouldn't be also assisting in the broader duties of the village itself. So, also there have been some, we could take notice. There was a article in the paper the other day about, it seems like there's a lot more going on between, as we often see among local municipalities, some disagreements, long-standing disagreements that this is just bubbling up into, perhaps. I don't know, but I don't know that we should be funding one side of perhaps a local dispute within a case. So for all those reasons, I was at not funding this.
Okay. So if we're 1-to-1,
does that go forward?
And keep talking to see if there's on either side. Whether there's any portion or component that you can reach consensus on, or whether you're both all or none.
I'm sympathetic to the fact that are they doing their homework, and we don't want to sort of pay for work that is more appropriately done by the local unit of government. But I do think that what we do here is pretty esoteric, and we're talking about brand new types of generation at scales that haven't been seen. And to be fair, sometimes what we do can seem a little dense to the outside world. And so I thought that I wasn't as much concerned that it was the sign of a lack of planning, but more that they've finally starting to understand that, okay, this is a way that we can actually actively participate in the proceeding, which is in addition to just filing public comments, right? And so I do think that they can add something to the record, given the fact that this is proposed to be the largest one, and given the fact that we continue to hear from hosting communities about concerns, it might be a good way to get information on the record. Now, would you be open to a decreased amount, or are you just at a flat? So again, they're not even, I understand they're next door. They're not a hosting community, and they're concerned about, they brought up increased sewer rates and the fire protection and so forth. But, that may happen no matter what development goes there, and they're not going to be able to get compensation for that. So I don't want to use, hey, this is a solar project. There's, that's not unique to this situation. It's batteries, yes, but it could be a larger scale building that their fire department's not prepared to equip, and they have to, so I am at zero. I am now, I guess I've evolved with, we used to sit here and kind of rewrite and do, it's their burden to come and show us a good application. I don't want to guess what might be good. I'm not prepared to
fund any of it today.
Okay. I mean, I'm not going to die on the hill, right? I mean,
It can just be laid over too.
I think that I think that they could potentially add value. I'm not going to rewrite their request.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm fine denying it. We don't need to lay it over.
Okay. I will move in docket 1 IC 533 that the commission deny the request in its entirety.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those abstaining?
Aye.
Okay. All right. So now we move to agenda item 9, which is docket 5-BF-2022. And this is a preliminary discussion, and I want to make it really clear that this is preliminary. We're not talking about merit today. We're trying to take a little bit of a different tact with this round of broadband grants because of the volume and based on feedback that all three of us have provided in prior rounds about funding. I think Commissioner Nowak said it best a couple of rounds ago, and that is sometimes it feels like we're trying to choose our favorite child because so many good projects get filed and they filter up to the top, and there's not a lot that differentiates them. So I want to give kudos to staff who listened to those discussions and who listened to that feedback and have charted out a path for us to take up this round of grants in multiple meetings in order for us to express our opinions and what we would like to see evaluated and what's important to us as we go forward. So we have a couple of threshold determinations to make today, and then staff will go back based on our discussion, and they will then present us with the merit order list. We will take that up in a future meeting. We actually have it scheduled for 2 future meetings where we will then actually decide on who gets awarded the grant dollars. So the first issue in front of us, we're going to look at timeliness, we're going to look at eligibility, we're going to talk about middle mile versus last mile, and then we're going to wrap up by talking about any other priorities that we deem to be important in evaluation. So just at a very high level, this is the grant round using ARPA dollars. So Governor Evers made $100 million of the Coronavirus State Recovery Fund and Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, which is ARPA, available for improvements to broadband infrastructure. And this is pursuant to U.S. Treasury guidelines. So I think that's also important to point out. These are not grants that we will be awarding based on the state's broadband expansion grant program. This is different. So we are guided by guidance from the U.S. Department of Treasury. I think it's important to point that out at the outset. I think it's also important to point out that in the recently approved budget, we also have dollars available for the state broadband expansion grant round. So if a project ultimately doesn't get approved using ARPA dollars, we still have the state broadband expansion grant program. So for this round of $100 million, we received 242 applications requesting a total of more than $440 million. We then provided a 3-week period in which the public or other parties could object to one or more of the filed applications. We received objections. We're not going to take up those objections today. Those objections will be taken care of when we talk about the merits. So as I indicated, we're just going to take up a couple of threshold matters today, and we're going to have a little discussion about what we think should be prioritized. So the first is timeliness. This is the topic that's always near and dear to my heart. 6 applications were filed after the deadline. So we opened up the round June 1st of this year. We stated that applications were due by 4 p.m. on July 27th. Commission staff took pains to have webinars multiple times, to send out information, to put together really good educational material to any interested party that explains the process. And in one of the slides, it says in very, very clear language, Do not wait until the last minute to earth. And there's an exclamation point. So I understand that one of the issues was there was, ironically, an interruption in internet service that caused some of the filings to come in late. I am sympathetic to that. I lost my internet yesterday because my power went out for no apparent reason, so I get it. I know that it's frustrating, but I think it underscores that you can't wait until the last minute. You just can't. And with 242 applications, in my mind, if we allow the late 6 in, we are potentially eliminating one of the other 200 plus applications that were timely filed. So you guys aren't going to be surprised, but I'm at alternative 1, where I would exclude these applications from further consideration. So, Commissioner Nowak.
I don't disagree with anything you said. They, when this much money, and not the aggregate, but for these individual projects is on the line, you don't wait until the last minute to get it done. And it's, in fairness to the others that did it and got it in on time, we should not include these. So I'm alternative 1.
Okay. Commissioner Huebner?
Yeah, I'm going to join you both at alternative 1 here as well today. I think to me what's different about my past leniency on this is that there, as you said, there's another round coming from state funding, and so these applicants will have another chance shortly to apply. And also, my understanding is that the companies behind these asks have other applications in this round, so it's not like we're shutting out this particular applicant entirely. Obviously, the particular projects will have to apply in a different round, but I'm at alternative 1.
Okay. Okay. The next issue is eligibility. And again, this goes back to the Treasury guidance. There are 2 minimum requirements for eligibility. The first is that eligible projects are expected to focus on locations that are unserved or underserved. And that is defined as lacking access to a wireline connection capable of reliably delivering at least minimum speeds of 25 down and 3 up. And then the minimum speed is that the eligible projects are expected to be designed to deliver upon project completion service that reliably meets or exceeds symmetrical download of 100 megabits per second. And there was some clarification, and I think that's important to point out too, that eligibility under the guidance doesn't mean there cannot be any overlap. And I think that's important, because I think we will likely see portions that there is overlap. I think we've learned over the last few rounds that it's getting harder and harder to have a project that doesn't overlap. And so just to be clear, in our memo, there's a quote from the Treasury guidance that says, "It suffices that an objective of a project is to provide service to unserved or underserved households or businesses. Doing so may involve a holistic approach that provides service to a wider area in order, for example, to make the ongoing service of unserved or underserved households or businesses within the service area economical." So I just wanted to point that out, that it's important for everybody to understand that we are able to approve a project that serves an area that it contains some served locations. So, however, Commission staff reviewed the applications and the objections that came in to determine whether or not they met those 2 minimum eligibility requirements. And they have identified 5 projects that do not meet eligibility requirements. I agree that those projects do not meet the eligibility guidance. I just want to point out the City of Milwaukee project. that project in particular, and the applicants, they acknowledge that there is a reliable 25.3 wireline service option within the city of Milwaukee. Their proposal really goes to more affordability, and I don't. By me saying that it's ineligible under this guidance, I'm not saying that that isn't an important part of getting broadband out there. We've talked a lot about it's not just about access, but it's about affordability, and that we have to look at that as well. But it's just not proper under the guidance from Treasury for us to evaluate that particular project. So for this one, in terms of eligibility, I'm at Alt 1, and I would find that all 5 projects identified are ineligible under Treasury guidance. Commissioner Noah?
Thanks. Yeah, just on the overlap issue, yeah, these aren't, our life would be so much easier if this were all nice little neat blocks and we could just move pieces. We have to strive, though, where the least amount of overlap and where we know something might be coming. So you're right that just because there may be some doesn't mean it's ineligible. But I think these here though are different because I think it was clear that there is ample service, and many of these are in an RDOF area too as well. So I agree with you on removing all of the ones identified by staff, and I too will say something about the city of Milwaukee. Most disappointed though that they actually filed something here when it wasn't even a close call that this is not the type of vehicle to do it. So I'm not sure if they didn't understand it or were asking us to ignore Treasury guidelines and approving it, but I thought it was very inappropriate to make that ask under these clear guidelines. So I joined alternative 1.
Commissioner Huebner?
Yep, I'm at alternative 1 as well. And I think everything's been said. Just to respond briefly to the Milwaukee one, if this is a nonprofit organization, they apply to a lot of grants, probably. So if there's $100 million in their view, probably why not? We don't know that there will be that many applications. So for them, it's an opportunity to work on affordability. I think you're both right that it's not the right fit for this particular grant, especially when we have so many applications. So I'm at alternative 1.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about middle mile versus last mile. And this, I'm looking forward to hearing from you both. I think that this is an interesting topic. And again, I'll thank staff for teeing these issues up for us to have this discussion. So the interim final rule, which is the Treasury guidance, talks a little bit about the difference between last mile connections and middle mile. So middle mile, the way I think about it is sort of, it's forming the backbone and it's going almost like a highway, and then the last mile are the off-ramps that are actually getting to people. And there's a lot of discussion about which should come first, which one is more important, which should be given priority. And the guidance from Treasury does say that priority should be given to projects that include last mile connections or projects that connect subscriber locations to fiber, cable, or wireless networks. So it's not that we can't consider middle mile, and we received a number of middle mile projects. We received requests totaling nearly 80% of the funds that we have available. So this is an issue that we should talk about, because if we decide to go down the route of funding middle mile, then that's going to take potentially a significant portion of dollars off the table. Again, the guidance uses the word encourages, so it's not a requirement, it's just guidance. And middle mile projects are certainly eligible under the state broadband program. We have approved middle mile projects in the past. And we got some interesting feedback, and I've been in conversations with middle mile providers, and I understand the critical role that they play in getting broadband out. I get it. I think it's a way to spur other providers to go perhaps where they wouldn't consider going before. I think it can help to move providers along. I think some would say that middle mile projects have the potential to decrease the cost for those last mile projects, which is also a good thing. And I think that it's pretty widely understood that you do need a strong middle mile to get those better economics to get to the last mile projects. A couple of concerns I have with the proposed middle mile projects that were applied for under this round are the internet service providers who would have access to those routes. That gives me pause. And I know that we could, if we go down the route, we could condition dollars on the middle mile operator providing access to all internet service providers. And if they choose not to, then they can choose to not take the funds. But that makes me a little bit nervous. And I don't necessarily feel comfortable giving money in a situation where we don't know ultimately whether or not the last mile or the internet service providers are going to be able to connect into that middle mile infrastructure. So that gives me pause. And so for the purposes of this round, again, we received 42 applications totaling nearly $80 million. For this one, I would direct staff to remove all of the middle mile proposals. And I would also direct staff to investigate the topic of support and coordination, because I think we need to know a little bit more about middle mile. So that puts me at alternative 1 and subalternative A, and I'll tell you why. Because I think as we continue down the path of awarding grants, we've gotten, by and large, all the low-hanging fruit. And those were relatively, I don't want to say easy, but relatively lower cost projects to build that the providers went out and they were able to take care of that. As we get more and more people connected, it's going to become more difficult and it's going to become more costly to get people service. And so I would like to know a little more about how middle mile can play a role. And quite frankly, and it's mentioned in our memo, is there a role for the state to play? Is there a role for Department of Transportation or Department of Military Affairs to help with middle mile? Is that an appropriate place to help fill the gap? So for the purposes of ARPA funding, I'm at Alt 1, Sub-Alt A.
Okay. Yeah, we did 80%. I mean, that's a lot. We received a lot in the middle mile. And you go back to when this program again started, and although this isn't the state program, but this was supposed to provide that last mile but for. And it kind of seems like we're now moving away from, looking at real need, right? And we basically received construction projects in form of applications for a lot of, and we're not looking at what really would be done only with these dollars. That set aside, that is past. I don't think we can't undo that. But the middle mile, I think I agree with you too that I got nervous when it was proposed, like, well, we could start putting in the grant agreement that they have to do this. I'm like, wow, we're a grant program. We don't regulate this industry. I never want to regulate this industry. And we're starting to get into little nitpicky things that I think are starting to direct the business. I am not comfortable going there. Also, it would, tie up dollars that may end up not getting spent that could otherwise been spent on something we know would happen right away. So I don't want to do that. Now, that said, yeah, there is a role for the middle mile. I agree with having staff explore that a little more. I wasn't now I would remove, there are several in here. I would have staff take them out. There's a lot from one of the providers that does the middle mile. They identify that end user and the partner they have. There's somewhere they don't identify at all. I would take those out. I would have staff take those out for sure. Because if you don't even have an end use, like, get your application ready before and let us know. Because again, I don't want to provide dollars to someone that they don't even know if it's going to get hooked up and when. I wouldn't remove the other middle mile ones though. I would put them at the bottom of the list. I would have them rank, I would basically almost rank them separately, right? Or have them score lower, rank all the last mile ones, and then see where the dollars flow, and then let's see where the middle mile ones go, how they would integrate that. I'm not quite prepared to remove them all, those that have identified someone. I would rank them lower. I know the Treasury, and I want to be respectful of the Treasury guidelines and encourage that. And that's why I'm like, we should fund last mile first and foremost, and then see where, if some don't meet it. And that's not saying every last mile one needs to get funded. There may be a good reason not to. So that's where I'm at.
So you would, and I think, and I'm looking to listen, and correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm looking through the webinar slide deck, it looks like last mile connection is given more points, right? The 10 points. So that kind of gets at rank them lower.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you would remove the projects that have not identified the service provider, and you keep the other ones in. Okay. And then would you also have staff get additional information?
Yeah. And again, it's just, this is for purposes of sorting and, merits are a whole nother discussion.
Okay. Commissioner Huebner?
Yeah, this was a really interesting item teed up by staff, I think. Obviously, they saw a lot of applications here and sort of felt a need to maybe help give us the chance to guide that discussion before they plot 42 applications. I was kind of viewing this $100 million as a portfolio in a way, and therefore I was in a similar spot to you, Commissioner Nowak, which is to say that I wouldn't take all of them out. I think that the argument is essentially that, you can't have a last mile until you have the connection from the bulk system to, closer to the end users. And so to me, it was sort of a means to an end. I don't know how many, I guess my question would be, I was at alternative 2 in the range of 2 to 4 and picking, I don't know if we pick a number or just leave it at that range. I don't know if staff knows, Commissioner Nowak, or maybe specifically how many of the applications did list a partner at the last mile.
I don't.
Is it in that range, or do we know? Okay, I know one is listed here in the memo as the Norvado for the Ashland to Iron County, so that's one.
Right.
I don't know if there's even. I just don't know if there's more than that or not. So, anyway. I am at sub-alternative A for sure.
Yeah.
So I think we're all on the same page there.
Yep.
So I don't know if there's any more clarification. I was at alternative 2. I don't know, Chair, if you've
I think
convinced you of something, or if we need to find a compromise.
Yeah, so I think if we remove the applications that don't have the service provider identified, then we can be comfortable that we're not in the position of awarding dollars where we're having to condition it on things that we typically wouldn't condition those dollars on. I think it's cleaner rather than saying 2 to 4 or 3.
Yeah, I don't like picking picking a number.
Right, that sounds arbitrary. So I can join removing those that don't identify the service provider.
And And I'll join that too. I think that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, and I think too in our ranking, like, it should be very clear, middle mile, and you guys always put that, but like, the sorting, like, tell us outright, this is a middle mile project, and so we know.
Yeah, I think it would be good to see where they score, you know, in the whole list, but then identified as middle mile, and then we can see, do they compete on all the other metrics, or are they below for other reasons as well?
Right.
So, okay.
All right. The next is an option to awards and whether or not we should entertain limiting the number of awards to individual providers. And so if we did this, then it would result in staff presenting to us a smaller number of providers. And it would also have the impact of fewer co-ops getting dollars. So what's interesting about this is that the Treasury guidance also encourages us to prioritize support for broadband networks that are owned, operated by, or affiliated with local governments, nonprofits, co-ops. And so it looks like 62 applications meet this guidance of being in one of those categories. And obviously the 62 taken together are requesting more than we have available. So I think staff, again, did a good job of identifying a potential for, you know, do we want to right now say, and I should mention that the majority of co-ops in Wisconsin are located on the western part of the state, you know, so I think in years past, staff does an excellent job of providing us a map that shows all of the proposed projects, where they are, what county by county, so that we have a very holistic view of where these dollars are going. One of the potential impacts would be that if the co-ops are not limited, that it would look pretty heavily, that the investment would look pretty heavily weighted on the western part of the state. So again, I'll be interested to hear both of your thoughts. I don't think that there's a need to limit in this case. I want the best projects to come forward. And if Treasury guidance says that co-ops and local governments and nonprofits should be prioritized, then I think we need, just like we've discussed, I think we need to follow that guidance. And again, this is specific to this round. This has nothing to do with what is coming in front of us in our state round. So for this, I want to see the excellent proposals. I want those to be first as we look through them. And I feel like if we arbitrarily limit the number of awards per provider, that we're going to be cutting out some of those excellent proposals. So for this one, I was not inclined to limit the number of recommended grant awards to individual providers. So that puts me at alt 2.
Yeah, this is just something, obviously with a little twist on the Treasury guidance here, but, you know, we've run into very similar situation in previous rounds where multiple provider, you know, a provider gives multiple applications, or maybe it's just for whatever reason we try to, you know, they're skewed in one geographic, and we take that into consideration. We just have to do it on a bigger scale here. I am also not a fan of just drawing a line and arbitrarily and saying after X number you can't do it. The best project should be chosen, and this is one of the items that they get scored on, not all of it. So, you know, they may score low on some other things. So, you know, again, it's an encouragement. It's not a requirement that, you know, so I don't, I don't think that we should be limiting. I think that we're going to have to just do our job and take a look at all these very closely and see where the rest of the scoring comes out, and then I'm more comfortable doing it. But I don't want to put a arbitrary number on how many each can have.
Okay. Commissioner Huber?
Yep, I'm going to join you both there. The questions that I asked in my briefing kind of related. If you look at this list on page 16, you know, at the top, Marquette Adam has 7 applications for $6.9 million. School District of Fort Atkinson has 1 for $6 million, right? So that was my challenge, exactly the same as well. It's about the same amount of money. You know, why would one applicant for $7 million spread across 7 be artificially limited when another said, okay, well, we're just going to put in for this really big project and not break it up into smaller chunks. So I did have some consternation about that. I think it will shake out in the scoring and ultimately, you know, any decisions will be vague on the merit review. So I will join you both at alternative 2 so that we see all of them in front of us.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So now is our chance to talk about if there are other considerations that we would like the scoring panel to take into account and to, you know, reflect the priorities of the 3 of us. So just because we didn't limit the number of proposals per provider doesn't mean that we can't provide additional access or direction in terms of the merit list. So there are a couple of alternatives in front of us, geographic diversity, and then as many providers as possible, but that could be the way that we kind of rank them or kind of shuffle them. I thought about, you know, taking, and I know that this information comes to us in all of our rounds, but number of locations to be served, unserved versus underserved. I think that's really important. And I go back and forth when we start talking about cost per location, because I think that can really, really tell an incomplete story, especially as we get to, again, going beyond that low-hanging fruit as we get to more inaccessible areas. So I'm not inclined to really focus on cost per location, but I would love to hear what you guys think in terms of other considerations for merit ranking. Commissioner Nowak?
Yeah. So there's a couple things. One of the things that we well, first on the per mile, I think that column should be removed from our spreadsheet because it doesn't tell the whole story. It can be very, very misleading. And just to save our eyes too, if we can, because we're adding columns, if we can take one out. It's already in like a 4-point font anyway when it comes, because there's so much information in there. I would take that out. That's misleading. One of the things though, and I don't know if this is how they rank it, but we shouldn't be, a lot of these, we've seen these providers before, and we shouldn't be looking at these in a vacuum. And I know I know these providers have to send in reports all the time and make sure that they're obviously using the dollars as required. But to me, it's like your past performance should also indicate, you know, whether something is worthy. So I'd like to know which ones have been problematic, which ones have been slower than promised to get things done. I think past performance should play a role here if there are any red flags or just not even, you know, I think we need to know that, you know, that's how we shouldn't look at these all separately. So I'd like to have that considered. And really unserved, underserved, under here, it's really the same thing. But one thing I would like to know, I asked staff to look at, and again, I think just a map for us would be, you know, a year ago, it was about a year ago, the commission approved like $5.5 million in the CARES Act. Most of it was the wireless. I'd like to know now which, like those that were funded, which ones are now coming in that same area for a wireline one. So if you remember, I was concerned about getting those dollars out because I'm like, this is a Band-Aid, and I'm like, are we coming back now? And I think that should rank because, you know, now if it fits the underserved, but I think if we just funded those, because they said we got to get it out there with that, I think that matters. So those were just two issues I thought we should continue to look at.
Okay. Commissioner Huebner?
As far as the things that were in front of us as sub-alternatives, I thought sub-alternative A made sense to me. Looking at geographic diversity among projects, I think that we know there are pockets in every county of the state probably that have, you know, areas that need broadband access. And as a general matter, not putting a really low project just because we don't have one in a county. I'm not saying that, but as a matter among, as this says, otherwise identical or very close merit scores, serving more of the state, I thought that was important. I think, Commissioner Nowak, to your question about past performance, I think that's a good observation, and I think that, you know, we haven't asked for this, but looking forward, those ones that maybe haven't been as successful should tell us what they've changed. Have they changed individuals in charge of this? What have they done to correct any issues they've had in the past? And maybe that's not going to be in front of us this round, but as they think ahead to the state round, you know, if they have had a challenging one in the past, well, what are they going to do different to not repeat the same mistake? Not so that they're not just ineligible because they had a bad round, but should be incumbent on them to tell us what they're doing differently so that that makes an impression. So those were my thoughts. I think your, you know, observations about cost and location are in the same vein as well, because, you know, so we just talked about middle mile. Well, what happens if, you know, the next round is a trunk of middle mile to serve a few hundred at last mile, but you have to do it all at once? Well, the cost per location may be very high, but there's no other way to get it done. And I think those metrics can be helpful in some ways, but also not always tell the whole picture. So I don't know what to do about that, but I think those are good observations. So I would join Commissioner Nowak on past performance, and if they've addressed that in any way, and I would be at sub-alt A. I don't know if either of you are at that particular sub-alternative.
Okay. Well, I think staff usually does a map showing that. So
Yep.
what is different? What do you see different then? Like we can, like, I think we just talked about
it's the otherwise identical merit scores. I
Yeah.
think that's really where it comes into play, right?
Right. That to me,
But
you know, if
can
you've
shuffle
got,
it then, right?
Oh.
So remember how we're always like, well, what are we supposed to do?
right.
Start?
Right.
I think I do think it's really important, and I think they use those words intentionally, that it's otherwise identical merit scores. And so I get that. Like if it's going to, if a set of 10 are all ranking out at 88.7, you know, and 5 of them are in lacrosse, and then you have the 3 remaining spread out on the central part of the state, then that could help us differentiate. It could help us make that choice. So I think that's what.
Yep, that's what I'm getting at. Yep.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I'd go down to the 10th of a point, but some range of the same, within 5 points or within, I don't know how they score them exactly.
Yeah. So I was okay with sub-alternative A.
Okay.
So that's just showing still though, like, okay, and it's not they are not ranking one above the other. Cindy, you're like jump one.
Well, I think the confusion is this is really just a way of the filters and the shuffling. So they would all be considered. Yeah. But then when you see that tranche kind of in the middle, X projects, staff will use these additional criteria, which I hear to be compliance issues. I think we already consider the number of locations. That's already there and we talked about the underserved. You don't want necessarily to see the costs.
Right.
So that's not going to be a distinguishing. So it's really going to be this past performance, and then if you agree with this geographic diversity. So it'll just be, you'll see the full list with the tranche, but then these are just additional runs showing these differentiations. Did I get that right, Steph?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as long as it's an additional run showing it, then, I don't want a premature ranking of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, too, when we talk about past performance, it's important to also consider, are they delivering what they advertised they were going to deliver?
Right.
So if they came and they said, we're going to have service at fill in the blank, and then we find out that, or through complaints that we get here at the commission, right, that they say, I was told that this was going to be my service level. I'm not getting anywhere near this service level. I think we should know that. I think it goes right in line with, if you're coming and you are representing to us that this is what you're going to use state or federal dollars for, and you're coming back to us, then we need to be able to test and to push back and say, are you delivering what you advertised you were going to deliver?
Yeah. And we can't keep giving, again, blind to what's been happening. And I'm not saying this bad stuff is happening. We need to know. You do that with your own money, right? We just need to know. I think it's fair. And also, may I suggest, since this isn't technically on the broadband program, we can maybe try an auction next time if there's any federal dollars. It might save someone time. Rather than do it as a grant program. Something to think about, because that's how they did the RDOF, and maybe it might be still a competitive situation and just something to chew on.
Or maybe maybe not an auction, but maybe a targeted RFP, right? Like Commissioner Huebner, you mentioned, there are certain counties in the state that we know don't have service. Is it maybe time to start targeting certain parts of the state that we know need it, and perhaps that's a way to Yeah. Anything else?
Our hopes hinge on Congress, I think, passing the infrastructure bill, because there is hundreds of millions of dollars related to maybe being able to accomplish that.
Right. Just get targeted. Yeah. Okay. Is there? I'm looking at you guys. Is everything okay? Clear? Do you need anything else? Okay.
And just process-wise, to be clear, what we'll do is we'll memorialize in a minute entry to today's direction. Our plan is not to do, since we're taking this up in interim steps, and we need to be working on now implementing this as opposed to drafting an order on each of these interim steps. We will do minute entries that reflect your interim steps here, and everything will be wrapped up in one final decision once we've worked our way all the way through. So just to be clear, that's acceptable.
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay. So what the heck?
So no motion, right?
Yeah, we need to exclude.
Yeah,
we need to vote
a motion that then will just be reflected in the minute entry with the direction. And again, I think we're pretty clear. Don't necessarily need to restate each of the alternatives.
No. Well, let me give it a shot. Docket 5BF 2022, I move that we remove the grant applications as discussed for timeliness and other eligibility requirements, and that staff continue to prepare a memo for us pursuant to our direction provided to them today regarding the remainder of the balance of the application.
Well, yeah. And then removing the ineligible ones, too.
I did.
I thought you just did time. Sorry. Okay. All right.
Are you good, Cindy?
I'm good.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. That was really helpful. Okay. Agenda item 10 is docket 9709-FG-2020. This is the 2021 Energy Innovation Grant Program. Commissioner Huebner, you are leading. I will not continue to talk this week like I did last week.
Not a problem. Take a deep breath. Moving from broadband to Energy Innovation Grant Program. This is a memo to set out the scoping for what would be the third round of the Energy Innovation Grant Program. as just a quick background and reminder, these are dollars that were originally awarded to the state to the State Energy Program in 2009 through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. They originally went out as a revolving loan program. Those loans, many of them were paid back and recapitalized this fund. Back in 2017, the Commission decided to switch from a loan program to a grant program with those dollars. And in 2018, issued a first round of $5 million. And then the three of us were all at the Commission last year when we issued our second round, which was $7 million. And then up for discussion today is the third round, or the scoping for that. First, I want to say a thank you to staff. I think the consistency, I was a big proponent of this, of let's get this out on a consistent basis every year. I'm excited to see this again now, and that the application period can be consistent with what it's been in the past. There were some comments reflecting that it works well for manufacturers with their capital budget cycle. And I think in the past we've heard from local governments in a similar way that it helps them be able to plan. So I'm excited about this consistency and timing. We will talk about a number of things, but first up for decision is related to the eligible applicants. So this is, we have in the past, last time, had this open to manufacturers, and the MUSH market, which is municipalities, universities, schools, and hospitals, and nonprofits. I was really pleased with the diversity of applications we got last time from across those types of entities, and I was at alternative 1, which is on page 13, and essentially to offer this program once again to that same pool of eligible applicants. Chair Vaughn.
I agree. I think based on last round and the variety of applicants that participated, I think it's reasonable to allow all of them to apply again in 2021.
Yeah, we did this last, and when the first time it was more geared toward manufacturing. I understand the Paper Council and WIC's comments that the original purpose of the dollars, but I still think we should keep it open to everyone, just kind of like what we were talking about in the last round. The best applications should move forward. When we look at them, we shouldn't try to give one here. It should be based on, should be on the applicant, it should be on the project. So as long as the ranking is still that way, I think I'll join you on alternative 1.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I read all the comments that were submitted, and in particular, I asked staff about the comment that was filed by Wisconsin Industrial Energy Group and Wisconsin Paper Council, and I was informed that they are correct. Back in 2009, that was the purpose. It was solely for manufacturers, but that in fact they have been allocated the entirety of that original amount from 2009.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. I think that's an important fact to put out there, that they are correct. They are correct in what they stated in their comments. I followed up with staff, and the response was, yes, they're correct. However, they did receive the full amount of those funds.
Right.
And so these are in addition to
a second round.
Right.
Yeah, and some of my understanding is not really in the record here, but that was based on the recession, and we, as a manufacturing state, wanted to support our manufacturers, and a loan program made a lot of sense. We could offer lower interest than what you could get in the market, and some of the reason to changing this to a grant over time has been, hey, the interest rates you can get out in the market are more competitive than you can get from the state. So what are our dollars going to do as a loan, going back out again? So, okay, we're moving on, and some of these become interrelated quite quickly. The next decision item is on page 17, and I do have a handout, but I want to address just one thing before, and that is related to electric vehicles and RNG vehicles and transportation. So last round we did include that. We didn't get very many applications. Some of the feedback related to that was because, we only allowed applicants to apply for one project in one area. And that was some of the feedback we got from the first round of some very expansive applications that made it very hard to review and compare one to another. So as a sort of a first item, I just wanted to say I think that worked well. I know there was some calls in the comments to allow an applicant to apply in each bucket if they have more projects, like if they have an efficiency project, if they have a renewable project, that entity can apply for two. And I think it's really helpful for us, for those applicants, to pick their best one and bring it to us. So I didn't want to go down that road, and you guys can give your thoughts on that. I also wanted to address the electric vehicles, and that is to say we didn't have good uptake last round, and working with staff about that whole market, we've taken a step back, and staff has. They're working with DOT, Department of Transportation, and other agencies, and talking to stakeholders to figure out what to do next. It didn't seem ripe again to include here, and we didn't want to hold this round back. We had so many good efficiency, demand response, renewables, and storage projects. We didn't want to wait till we figure out EVs. A lot of stuff on EVs is frankly contingent on the congressional bill on infrastructure, because there's a sizable chunk of funds in there for electric vehicle infrastructure. So until that gets passed and more information is known, there's just a little bit of a waiting. And so I don't see EVs or transportation has gone forever out of this program. I just want to make that clear to folks. But right now we have, these three areas that were way oversubscribed, and we know there's a lot of good projects waiting to be done. And that was my thought on transportation. So I don't know if you want to address either of those before I have a detailed change on the planning.
I'll just touch on the applicant's ability to apply for more than one activity. I actually think we should allow them to apply for more than one activity, and this is why. If you have a particular applicant who is really good at these types of programs, there is a substantial amount of overlap, and I don't think that they should be precluded, because I get your point about they should pick their best proposal, right? But what if their best across all three activities are better than the next person?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't like the idea of us arbitrarily saying you can only apply for one. I think the purpose of these types of grant programs is to ensure that the best projects are getting funded. And so I was actually in a different spot than you, and I would allow them to apply for more than one activity. And I was pleased to see that the EV was removed, because I think you pointed out all of the points that it's not appropriate for this particular round, and that's not to say that activity isn't occurring in Wisconsin. Activity is occurring, but not within the parameters of this grant round.
Yep.
Yeah, we allow multiple providers to provide multiple applications in broadband, and we pick the best. Mm-hmm. And it's something I think we should look at when we approve these. Is why is one? And I think it would be a rare situation, like someone got a lot of it, right? But I think allowing, again, let's see what we get, and then we can rank as we see necessary moving forward. So I would allow them to apply for more than in one category. On the EV market, though, I think I don't disagree with taking it out, but I think it speaks a lot about the state of always the next big thing EV market, which is what we keep saying. And the fact that we had money on the table and there was nothing taken speaks volumes. And there is work being done, but let's just all, the ways down the road, it's a very societal change as well that's going to take place. So we shouldn't be forcing and tying up a market and tying up dollars that could otherwise be spent in areas here. I know Renew filed some comments saying interest in 2021 is expected to be a record year. They cite a national program that we even talk about Wisconsin-specific data. So I didn't think that their argument here certainly wasn't persuasive about the EV market here. So I agree with taking it out.
Okay. I will join you both at the allowing multiple, so one applicant to have multiple applications, one in each category. I will note, I think that was I think the top reason why we saw that. I think kind of what you said, Chair, is some of these entities are ahead of the pace, and they're going to be the ones most likely to be ready to do something about transportation. And so I think it's something that we'll have to wrestle with staff. I do think it's still right to keep it out. Let's do the work across, multiple agencies and with stakeholders and figure out how to bring it back in the right way for the next round, if that makes sense. But I think that opening this up may create that opportunity for more and better applications. I think one of the challenges was I think we had a max in the EV of I don't know, but it was much less than the $1 million we offered for efficiency. So if you're a sophisticated entity and you've got $1 million for efficiency and you can only choose one, it drove them to those market titles. So I think it's worth it to do the homework, but with this change, we'll see what we get and we can incorporate the lessons learned and see if transportation makes sense next time. So with that, I do have a handout. It's a couple of minor changes based on my discussion with staff and some of the feedback. Thanks. I've got one, thanks. Does Kishan have one?
Audience don't have any.
So we're just passing this around the room physically here. Cindy, is it posted or do you want to make a note?
For those listening, you can find the handout posted on the events calendar in the lower right-hand corner.
And I'll take the first and the last because those two go together. So it's within this table. It's a table 1. So one of the changes staff made was reducing. Last time we had a planning grant up to 50,000 or up to 100,000, and they reduced that down to 50,000. One of the reasons they said is, in the past, I think the first round, the idea was if multiple entities are going to work together, they could apply for a bigger planning grant, and then we would know that this information is being transferred between the entities and sort of getting more of a market change as opposed to one entity. But what we saw the last time was single entities applying for the full 100,000, and we did award those. This would kind of resolve some of staff's concerns, but still allow that higher and consortium-based approach. So it would allow a single applicant to do 50,000 and multiple applicants to come together to do up to 100,000. And that's basically what's described in that final bullet down there. So I think it might be helpful to just get feedback on that particular piece, and then we can talk about some of the other, these are, I think, somewhat minor changes to the eligible activities, unless you think I should just go through them all at once.
Yeah.
Sure. Just go through all of them?
I think you should go through them all at once, and then I would like to just take a
short break?
Yep.
Okay. So the second change then is under eligible activity 2. There was a number of comments related to what they call beneficial electrification. It's my view that, if you're doing a heat pump, and you're showing that you're saving energy, that's energy efficiency. And I just wanted to clarify that that's eligible under this, in my view. It's not really necessarily to expand or do something else that they couldn't have done, but just a clarification that if you're coming into this thinking, heat pumps or something else that, is switching fuels, but it's saving BTUs, that's eligible in my mind. And I think something that is more on the cutting edge and may give us some more innovative technologies. So I thought just that simple addition to clarify that would be helpful. And then the second one is quite minor. It relates to something that Slipstream brought up, but it relates to these planning grants and essentially doing the planning, but sharing the information. So technology transfer, if you're doing audits, if you're doing something and you can share that amongst like-minded entities, and market transformation, again, looking at, if a consortium wants to come together and think about heat pumps for affordable housing buildings or, some technology for manufacturing. I know we had a really good consortium-based manufacturing one last time. It was from a trade group, but they didn't identify the specific companies. And I think we gave feedback that, hey, if you came in with these 4 in this specific industry, that would be great. But it was a little vague. So I think talking about how they're going to transfer technology between like entities, just again, calling it out, not a big change, but just making it specific that, hey, this would be valuable and interesting to us as you look at sharing that knowledge and moving more than just yourself along this process of energy efficiency. So those were my changes, and any feedback, or if you want to take a break, happy to oblige.
I think let's take just a short break, unless Commissioner Noack, you have immediate?
No, I don't have any immediate comments.
Okay. All right. We only need 10 minutes.
Sure.
Thanks, Mom. Okay, we're back. We just took a short break to look at Commissioner Huebner's handout, and I just wanted to make sure that we weren't moving the total budget, that these are just within the existing budget amounts, right? And that would change.
The next question. So I don't know if you have thoughts on that too, but
I think one thing is that I understand now that it's not that we would require this technology transfer or the sharing of information, but it's more how to direct the RFP.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a helpful clarification for me. I'm wondering, under eligible activity 3, where it says electric vehicle planning or other, I'm assuming that means other technologies. I just it wasn't clear to me what was meant by or other.
Okay. Staff wrote this. Let me reread it. Yeah, I think it's market transformation or other markets or other technologies, right?
Okay. Commissioner?
Yeah, I mean, sounds like we're not totally clear on that either. So I would strike maybe the or other. I think I like your suggestion, to kind of clarify in the consortium. It's just saying we would invite that, right? But seems like we're not 100%. I'm not 100% clear on what other could mean or apply to. That could cause. That's just we're going to get applications and say, yeah, so it's going to cause problems later. So I would take it out. Otherwise, I don't have any other concerns. I think your clarifications are good here and helpful.
Okay. I would be fine with taking out or other. I think it stands for market transformation planning with an example such as electric vehicle, and they have other markets they want to transform. It would be up to the merit review to decide how good those are, how good those proposals are.
So it's not necessarily that we're looking for additional technologies. That's kind of what I wish that we would. There's so much talk about battery storage. What's next, right? So I don't know. I hope that we're sending the proper signal that we're looking. I say this all the time, and I know it gets old, but it's energy innovation, right? And I want it to be clear that we're signaling that there could be other technologies that are in their nascent stages, and that would be this is the perfect program to take a look at those and to scope those out. So I think if we take out or other, I think that's fine. I just think it's helpful to staff and for anybody else interested to hear that we're interested in all different technologies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the such as is example, not limited to.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Yeah, I don't have any other concerns.
Okay, so I think that would put us at alternative 2 on eligible activities, modify as per this handout with the discussion. And then and then as well with the maximum grant request, pages 17 and the top of 18, that would put us at our alternative 2 as modified. Me at alternative 2.
Okay. Yep.
Seems fine. Okay. Yep. So then the overall budget question, page 18.
Do we address, I'm sorry.
Oh.
We didn't address there was a suggestion about a cap on the match within sub-activity. Did you have any changes, or are you assuming we're going to keep it the same?
This is related to the solar PV?
Yep.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Well, I like that.
Taking it out.
I wasn't, and I don't know if they had removed, I don't think that they did remove, I think we have to decide that. Yeah, I didn't know when we were gonna.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I like the idea of a match. I always want some skin in the game. So whether it's tied to the ITC rate or we just say, a 20%, I know it caused some confusion, but I think we can figure it out. I think there's got to be, let's just don't tie it to the ITC, just say 25%.
Mm-hmm.
And the other alternative is, well, if we take it out, they said we could take it out for this one because it was different than some of the others, but could also, in order to equalize it, have everyone have the match too. So that's the other argument. So that's, I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Well, I thought, last year it was a fine idea. I think staff points were that it's somewhat confusing, but also a little bit arbitrary, where it sort of removes that as a competitive element, where if some entities are able to come in with more match, it scoots them up higher on the list, whereas we sort of equalize that across all of them, and so no one was able to stand out, really. So I was fine with taking it out, because I think the other approach is, as you said, which is possibly to put in a cost share match across everything.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not really developed here, so I don't know what percent of a cost match we would be requiring for this round, unless we want staff to go back and propose something. But I think that, to me, it's better as a merit criteria, where we look at it and the ones with more match float to the top, in my view, or at least on that criteria. They float to the top, and then we weigh that with the other priorities that we have with the program. So I think I'm content with letting that dictate how we ultimately fund. Is they bring in the more match, that's going to get them higher points. So,
yeah. And I think you're right to bring that up, Commissioner Nowak. I think it's in here as a decision item, but then it doesn't appear anywhere. And I was at removing that mandatory match requirement and just having it be not arbitrary, but just have it be still listed as a ranking criteria to see, okay, what is your match amount? So I was comfortable with removing it.
I think we'll just keep it with the other. It will be something that's fine. I'll just keep that obviously in consideration. The match is very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to you guys as well. So, okay.
Okay, so moving on then to the overall budget.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a table on page 18 that denotes kind of the status of the fund. We had about $29 million, and then between the two award rounds that are obligated out, we have about $21 million left. As I've mentioned, I'm in the vein of sort of consistency, and so I was coming in thinking the $7 million round was about right. We bumped this up from $5 million before. We do $7 million now, and that gives you 2 more years at $7 million, and we get this consistent cadence, and then we kind of see where we're at. I know there was some proposals to raise it and put more money out now, so obviously either of you two think that that's a good idea. I'm all ears, but I was at alternative 1 on this, which is to say approving the table 3 that's listed on page 19.
Yeah, I went back and forth on this. On the one hand, these are dollars that go back to 2009, right? We're still sitting on them, and now we're coming out of another, not another pandemic, but another event that necessitates these types of dollars. And so on the one hand, I was thinking, well, shouldn't we be a little more aggressive in trying to get more dollars out to help us figure out where we're going in the industry? And again, like I said, everybody's hot on battery storage right now, but what else is under consideration or under development that could potentially help us as we transition into different forms of generation? What other things should be done to the grid in terms of resiliency as we're seeing weather events become more extreme? And kind of, I just was thinking, well, what are we waiting for?
Mm-hmm.
But I get it that we also, it's a tough balance because we also want to have some dollars, and we've got to provide certainty to the market going ahead that we're not going to empty the piggy bank in one fell swoop. And so I was thinking that $10 million would make sense for this round, just because I think that there is a lot of demand. I think I'm extraordinarily interested in seeing what we get in terms of demand response. I think that holds a lot of potential. So I was comfortable bumping it up again. Again, I understand it's a balance that we have to strike. But I just think if we're seeing new solar facilities come online at such a quick pace, I think the more that we can do to spur innovation, the better off all of us will be. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I was like you, why are we leaving money sit? There's projects out there, the demand is out there. Why should we be hanging on to money? And, the consistency is good, right? But I don't know that a lot of people are going to complain if we put more money in a round of for applications. So my thought, I'm fine with going to 10, and then the next round, we should just spend down the balance too, because at some point, program needs to go away. I mean, it's out of money unless for some reason it gets refilled, but let's close it out too. So to me, we can do maybe 2 more rounds unless there's a little more coming back in from the revolving, but I don't think there's much. So if ever, with some of the projects. So I'm fine. If we, just want to, would you proportionately add the $3 million, Chair Bach, to the categories, just so it's a proportional increase for each category? Yeah, I'm fine with that. And then really, I'd like to see the next round, and we don't have to decide it now, come back and maybe there's only one more round of this.
Yeah, I mean, some of I should have mentioned this too. I had my sticky note, but I missed it, is, especially to me, taking EVs out, and then the awards we just had last week on microgrid feasibility, and thinking about, okay, do we want to actually fund those microgrids later? So to me, it was exactly that balance that you had, Chair, of like, how much innovation can we fund now, but how much maybe are we setting the stage for some really great innovation down the road that we may want to hold some funds back for that? Looking at maybe 12 months from now, we may have some great ideas on transportation or some great ideas on microgrids or both. So that was another reason why I thought, it's a little bit status quo now, but I do, respect your points that there obviously is more demand than we were able to fund last time. But I think I would be at the $7 million and then reserving more for some of these things that we're not able to fund today.
Okay. So I'd be at 10, and then I would bump them
up by $1 million. Yep. So renewable would be 4.25, energy efficiency, demand response 4.25, and comprehensive energy planning 1.5.
Yep.
Oh, you would do $1 million to each?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, that would
that's not proportional.
Sorry.
It would be,
Where's Jenna?
I don't go to that.
I would throw her at
I'm
it.
sorry, it would be, right, it'd be
Sorry.
pro rata, right? So it's not, you have to take the 3 million and split it out the way the 7 million is split out.
Mm-hmm.
Staff can do the math.
Staff can do the math?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, so it's not just $1 million to each bucket.
All right.
Sorry, okay.
All right, I had $1 million per bucket, but okay.
No.
And
that-
Commissioner Havener, you're staying at the budget as proposed.
I think so. If you've got your 2 votes, I think I'll make a vote for more innovation next year.
Okay.
Well, the feasibility grants are pretty awesome. So I think having money to fund some of those are really important. So that's why I reserve them. But that will just, without doing the math, my math brain tells me that proportionally splitting will lead to some strange numbers. And so as long as you're okay with that, it's not going to be a round number like 750,000. It's going to be a strange number, and as long as you guys are fine with that.
I will sleep at night if it's not a round number.
Okay.
I'm not gonna
Okay.
sleep well.
So we've covered that, and I think we're on to our final item, which is essentially to direct staff to work with Delegate Commissioner, which is me, to develop the RFP and to move this program forward. And I think based on our discussion, I'm at alternative 1.
I am as well. That's one I am as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. Looking forward to a great long. Thanks.
Okay. In docket 9709 FG 2021, I move that we approve as modified the 2021 Energy Innovation Grant Program pursuant to our discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, our final agenda item today is 9808-CE-100. This is the certificate of public interest and necessity of the Apple River Solar to construct a generation facility in the towns of Clayton, Beaver, Apple River, and in Lincoln and Polk counties. Commissioner Kinder.
Thank you. 1 second. Okay, Apple River Solar LLC is a subsidiary of NG Renewables, or National Grid Renewables. They proposed a 100 megawatt AC solar photovoltaic generating facility to be located on approximately 891 acres in Polk County. In addition, the applicant proposes to build a project substation at the southwest corner of the project next to the existing Apple River substation, which is a Dairyland Power substation, and there would be a short 739-foot overhead tie line to connect those 2 substations and get the power into the grid if it was approved. Intervenors in the proceeding included Polk County and Renew Wisconsin. The party hearing was held virtually on June 23rd, 2021. Public hearings were held later that day at 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. We received public comments throughout the process. We received 31 public comments, and we had 5 individuals participate in the public hearings. Again, we've had many of these before. I'll just repeat some of the things I've said. The specific application in front of us today is for a merchant generating plant. Thus, under the CPCN statute, many requirements apply, but items related to the need and economic factors are not part of our decision today. In addition, all of the land for this project has been voluntarily leased by the landowners. Our job is to consider whether the design and location is in the public interest, considering alternative locations, individual hardships, reliability, and environmental factors, as well as the orderly land use and development plans for the area involved. As I've said in the past, our state's energy priority requirements for new electric generation, with solar energy included as among the second highest priority on the list. We have a changing generation mix in the state, which is going to reduce our need to import fuel from other states and harness an energy source we have here in Wisconsin. It's a clean, renewable source of energy. It's not going to produce any air pollution or water pollution or use water to make the electricity. And about $400,000 annually will be provided to the local governments hosting the project, about $233,000 to Polk County and about $167,000 to the local townships. The applicant has also set up a community fund to provide $20,000 annually to the Amory and Clayton school districts. Recently, I think 2 weeks ago, took up another solar CPCN application from this developer, and I stated concerns and recommendations for them. As I think I've recommended every time I've led this discussion, developers need to do the community and neighbor education in advance of filing CPCN applications and work with the community and educate them. Obviously, we get the information. The applicant sort of reflects, hey, all this information is in front of us, and it is, but it seems clear that all of the information is not in front of the local community. At least some of the questions that continue to be asked are not being answered or otherwise not being understood. This application is different than the last one. This one is what I would call a very rural setting. There are certainly some nearby neighbors residents that oppose the project, and we're going to see that. But as far as, the siting, this is a very rural area. It is not a community as we saw, or two communities as we saw with the last development. So those are my opening remarks. I don't need to discuss any of the uncontested items. I think that was reflected in the minutes or in the upfront items. So Chair Vach, did you have any other opening remarks?
I do not.
Okay. Commissioner Nowak?
No, it really I think you're right that the developer needs to continue to work, but also the municipalities need to continue to plan. If these things are going to come, they need to start looking at what is in existence now. So we, pursuant to our discussion from a week or 2 weeks ago, whenever that was, on the other project.
Okay, so moving ahead, the first two items are uncontested on our decision matrix, and we'll be following the decision matrix posted on the agenda as we go through this discussion. The first item we'll discuss is issue 3 on page 3, and that is, if approved, would the proposed project comply with Wisconsin statutes 196-491, 3D6, and not unreasonably interfere with the orderly land use and development plans for the area. In this one, they have entered joint development agreements with all of the local governmental units, and no entity brought up that it obstructed or otherwise was not part of the orderly land use and development plans. Interfere, I should say. So I was at alternative 1. Chair Vaughn?
Yeah, I agree, and I'll just say that the existence of joint development agreement helps to clear up a lot of questions in my mind, and it just goes back to your earlier point about the more work you do up front, the better. So I was also at alt1.
Commissioner Nowak?
I agree.
Issue 4 is uncontested, and issue 5 gets to the siting. Is the design and location of the proposed project in the public interest, considering the siting criteria of 196.491 3D3, or should we modify anything? This is similar to what we've seen in the past. I think the preferred area is preferable, in my view, for various reasons. However, I didn't find any of the alternate areas to be improper or otherwise not able to be permitted. I will praise the applicant on this, and this is in the environmental review and the DNR. There's very few permits needed. They've avoided waterways, wetlands, et cetera, in their design. And so I think they did a good job on that siting side of this. I'm at alternative 1. Chair Vach?
Agreed. Alternative 1. Yes, I agree.
Issue 6 is a long list of letters A through Q of general conditions, and these, again, have been continued to be refined as we've taken up, as this commission has taken these up. We've added many in that I think really add a lot of assurances related to these projects. So I am at alternative 1, which would include every single one of these as they're written in the decision matrix.
I agree.
I agree.
Issue 7A is related to stray voltage, and that's uncontested that's going to be required, stray voltage testing. 7B is noise studies, that's uncontested, it would be required. 7C is following the most stringent electric code applicable for that specific work, and that is uncontested and will be required. Issue 7D is one related to an avian mortality study or otherwise annual reporting of their incidental wildlife reports that they're planning to keep. This developer has said that they will be voluntarily tracking wildlife reports. That's something I've supported in dockets, even where developers haven't done that. So I would not support the full avian study, but I would support the annual sending to us annually their wildlife incidental reporting. And that, I think, is a version of alternative 1. But that's where I'm at on those 2 items.
So I landed in the same spot. I just have it as alt 2.
Okay.
Because I would remove that avian, the first bullet point, the avian mortality study.
Yep.
So, same
okay.
spot.
Yeah, they've agreed to do the incidental, that's fine. So alt 2.
Okay. Issue 7E is related to potential impacts to non-participating landowners be implemented as a condition. And this is related to providing advance notification to all residents adjacent to the project area related to construction activities and timing, including time of day restriction. The condition was written by staff. Apple River Solar has proffered a modified version of that. My understanding from staff is that their edit goes in the spirit. It is essentially the same spirit of what staff is proposing, and that this is a good thing, which is to say there will be notice provided of construction to all properties adjacent to the project prior to the commencement of construction, including contact information for the project if any resident or neighbor needs to contact them for some reason. So I am fine with the Apple River modification, which is alternative 2.
I was as well.
I agree with that as well.
Okay. Issues 7F and 7G are somewhat related, and they relate to whether the applicant should establish compatible but effective screening vegetation in this project area. 7F is related to that around the substation and any potential operations and maintenance building, which happens to be at the east corner of 70th Street and 110th Avenue. This one, I talked to staff quite a bit and sent maps and received maps back. I would be really curious to see where you guys are at. We have ordered screening around substations in past dockets, and that's represented here in the decision matrix. I don't know that we should, again, it's the shall establish versus some of the language that they use in 7G. The applicant modifies that, again, to sort of shall work with interested and to the extent reasonable and economically feasible. That's the type of language that I think that I would support for this. I don't know if either of you are looking at this, at all or not. But if you were interested in supporting this, I would modify the language to be more similar to what we see in 7G, which is to say the applicant's modification to the extent reasonable and economically feasible. So I'll leave it at that. It's a complicated little area because there was a public commenter whose driveway goes right to that road, and that's where the substation is going to be. It is going to be set back. My understanding, right across the road, there's a wetland, so I don't know that you can plant something right there, and there's not going to be panels there, but perhaps a little bit back from that, you could plant something. So I don't know the specific best thing to do here, so I'm going to kick it to you, Chair, to see what you think.
Okay, so this one I didn't think was necessary, and
Okay.
I think it's all case-by-case basis, and it depends on the land that we're talking about and the surrounding buildings and the existing topography of the land. And for this, I didn't think it was necessary. It also goes to the heart of the developer working where they're going to be essentially living, right, for the next 25 to 30 years. I don't feel that it's necessary for us to require them to do this as part of this project. So I was at alternative 3.
Yeah, just because we don't order it doesn't mean that it won't be done.
Right. Right.
And this is one of those, well, it's been done in others, but it is individual, and to me, there wasn't enough there to say it's absolutely necessary. Like you said, the developer is going to be, or if this is later sold, someone's going to be there if issues come up. It can, but there's not enough here to say it must be done. So I'm at alternative 3.
Okay, I'm going to join you at that for 7F. And on 7G, this is related to a similar issue, compatible but effective screening vegetation. This would be for the solar project, the panels themselves. I was kind of going back and forth between alternative 3, but I think last time, Chair, you were at the modified language of alternative 2, and I'm going to come down there as at least a starting position. That that modified language of Apple River Solar in this decision matrix. I think that that's good. Commissioner Nowak, your point that if we don't order it, it still may happen. I think that may be true, but I think putting a little bit of enforcement, to me, this kind of goes to the public interest and these neighbors and just making sure that they are taking the steps they need to take. So I will be at alternative 2, Apple River Solar's language as written in this decision matrix. Chair?
Yep, consistent with my past decisions, I was also at alternative 2. And I'll just underscore, I think this is just good practice. If you're a developer, you should be working with interested, non-participating landowners that are adjacent to your project. I just think it's good business practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was, this developer, we had this almost exact language, and this last time, and this one I'm fine with, it makes sense, so I'll be at alternative 2, the modification suggested by the applicant.
Yeah, I think it's, this is not really my role as a commissioner, but just thinking about it as a person in the area, if you want to look at brush and trees, or if you want to look at the panels and sort of what height of, I think it's a choice. I don't think we should mandate that there should be, screening all the way around, because that may actually be much taller and more of an impact than the panels themselves, which are not going to be that tall, in my view. So this is working with neighbors to the extent feasible. Okay, so we're moving on to 7H. This was a little bit of a different one. There was some back and forth all the way up to the end, I think, of the rounds of testimony. Should the applicant work with DNR to conduct a survey in suitable habitat? There's a specific bird species that could possibly be there. According to DNR desk review, the applicant, when they did their field delineation, did not see evidence of this. And so the question is whether we should order them to do the study. Apple River has some language related to working with DNR to determine if the species-specific habitat surveys are necessary. So I'm going to defer to you, Chair, to see if you have a opinion on this. I may be fine with either.
Yeah, I was okay with this modified language because I think it's reasonable. Don't do a study if the species isn't present, right? I mean, that's just...
And that's what my question, not being expert, is how do you know if it's not present if you haven't done a study? So I don't know what level of effort it is to make the determination, so...
Yeah, I was okay with the applicant's proposed language. I thought it was reasonable.
Okay.
So I was at alt 2.
Commissioner Nowak?
Yeah, actually, I'm not okay with their proposed language. I would not include it at all. I'm at alternative 3. This is a situation where I've been concerned over several applications where the DNR knows they can't order it. It's out, it's not within the guide, doesn't meet the guidelines, but then tosses it basically to us to say, hey, you should recommend this because, we shouldn't become an extension of the DNR to do what it cannot do. And add these order conditions to permits like that. And I don't know even that, so then they have to work with the DNR to determine if it's even necessary. Well, then who arbitrates that? That was the other question.
Yeah.
What if there are Apple Rivers at one spot and DNR is like, you still need a survey in there? No, I think it just makes matters worse. So again, because I think this is something the DNR wanting us to order something that they can't, because it doesn't meet the criteria, we shouldn't expand it through a CPCN. So I'm at alternative 3.
Yeah, and talking to staff, I think my takeaway from that discussion was that they essentially think the study, likely to be needed to confirm that it's not there. So I will join you, Chair, at that language of alternative 2, and we'll see how it plays out.
Okay.
Issue 7I is related to the photovoltaic heat island effect. We've taken this up previously, and in the past we've directed staff to work with Wisconsin universities to try to learn more about this issue. So I'm at alternative 3, that it's not necessary for this project, but would reinforce our previous direction related to this.
I'm at the same spot.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay. Issue 7J is related to an independent environmental monitor. This is the second time we've seen this specific request from the DNR. It essentially relates to the amount of land related to this project versus other permits that certain staff members have to oversee, and whether or not DNR has enough staff to do that. We talked about this with the Springfield Solar Project, and I think we're at alternative 3 then. I'm at alternative 3 here. I do think a couple things. One, no, I've got notes on the next one, sorry. So I'm at alternative 3. I don't think this is necessary. So Chair Bach.
I agree with you. Well, 3.
Yeah, again, same reason last time. They try to avoid all waterways. There's 2 permits, and they still, I'm kind of nervous to see what a big project's now going to look like if they're asking for an IEM on simpler projects.
Yep, and I think, the stormwater issue is real, and so I mean, the applicant made the point of what they're going to do to mitigate. I think, to me, it's just reinforcing that matters. You can't clear the land and then not plant something for, a cover crop that's going to solidify it and then hope that a rainstorm's not going to come. You got to do the process. You got to do the best management practices that they've represented they're going to do. I think the pre-construction meeting that we've approved now and is kind of standard, that's an important part of that discussion. So moving on to issue 8 is the Wisconsin Environmental Policy Act. This is uncontested, and issue 8A is uncontested, that it is compliant with that act. Issue 8B is, will the proposed project have undue adverse impact on environmental values? I have 2 comments on this. I'm at alternative 1, that no, it does not. On the good side, I thought the back and forth related to specific things they could plant to support certain insects. The applicant said they would be doing that. I think that's good and fine. The one disconnect that I saw was related to the drainage tiles. This is an issue I've brought up in pipeline cases too. Farmers' drain tiles and damaging those and getting them fixed, that matters. The joint development agreement, sorry, I'm in the weeds here. The joint development agreement talks about public drainage infrastructure, which would be like county or town culverts and things. That's different than the tile that might be in a private landowner's. But, so I don't have an order point on this. I just wanted to bring it up here that I think there's a disconnect between what's in that JDA and the obligation to, if you're affecting the private farmers' drainage, you're going to want that fixed too, because you don't want pools of water in your solar farm either. So that's just a note to, and if either of you agree with that, maybe we can craft an order point. But I just saw that as one disconnect that wasn't really closed in this particular matter. So, but I am at alternative 1.
I mean, I think you raised a good point. You're not in the weeds, you're in the drain tile.
Yeah.
But I think I don't have enough in front of us right now to make it an order point in this case. But I think you bring up a really good point, and you're bringing your personal background to bear. And I think for future cases, if there is a disconnect between what's in the JDA and what will actually be done, I think that it's good direction to staff to look into that. And I think it's a good point. But I was also at alt 1.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you raising it.
Yep.
It's something worth, and I'm sure they're listening too.
Yep.
I'll join you at alt 1.
Okay. So that brings us to our final issue, which is 9. Should we grant a CPCN? I'm at alternative 2 with condition yes. It's in the public interest to grant a CPCN. Chair?
Yeah, and I'm also at alt 2. I just want to take a minute to thank staff. I think in 20 years of practicing in this industry, I don't know that I've seen this volume of CPCNs come before this agency. And the fact that we process them as quickly and as efficiently as we do while reading through all of the comments and reading through all of the material, I think says a lot to staff who's working on it, working on these projects day after day after day. And sometimes I think our discussion here, while it may seem truncated, that doesn't mean that we don't appreciate all of the work that goes into it. And again, 20 years ago, this agency was not processing the CPCN every week. So I think that is worth noting. But yes, I'm at alternative 2.
Yes, that's great.
Okay. I think that's a great point, Chair, that there's a lot of work going on at the commission right now, and we really appreciate it. I also think it's a point to a somewhat brief discussion that ultimately approves a 700 or 800 acre project, and to just understand that we read all of this. We understand the change. We get it. We understand it, and that's why we wrestle with a lot of these. But you don't necessarily see that here because the records are what they are, and the discussion is going to be based on what's left and what hasn't been resolved. That isn't to say that we don't, clearly understand exactly the implications of the permits that we're approving. Right? So,
Docket 9808 CE 100. I move that the commission grant a CPCN for Apple River Solar LLC pursuant to our discussion today.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that concludes our official business for today. The next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, September 30th, 2021 at 10:30 a.m.
Will we stand adjourned until Thursday, September 30th?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everyone.